books, as I said, I've done a lot of travel guides, and I did a guide to Maputo in southern Mozambique. I did various guidebooks for around the country. I've done some anthologies. I did another memoir. This is the first sort of really serious mainstream book, I'd say. And it's a different kind of writing. Yeah, it does get easier, but then I think you also, as you write, you raise your standard. So when I look back at the books that I'd written before, I want to take a big red pen and cross out half the adjectives. Wow, it's terrible. So floral and over-descriptive. And this book is a lot more punchy. This book also, in terms of the writing process, one of the most interesting things was working with a very fearsome editor who was based in Brisbane in Australia. Her daughter had been at Rhodes, she left the country, one of those packing for Perth people who left just after democracy, and all the whiteys were scared and she ran off. But she's one of the publisher's top non-fiction editors. And I called her the grammar Nazi, because she really was the most excruciating person to work for. By the time I woke up in the morning, her batch of edits would be waiting for me. And every single page, literally starting on page 1, there'd be query. Then further down she'd say conjecture. Further down she'd say cliche, please change. Then she'd say, I've Google mapped your old address and it doesn't exist. Please check. So she had me on the hop for, it was 6 weeks. She edited in batches. So she'd say that lot first, and we'd try and tidy up everything. And it was a very interesting exercise because she was a bit, like I said yesterday, it was a bit like going to a dentist or somebody who digs in it was painful. But it was really good because she checked the credibility. She checked things like, did so-and-so have an accent on the E? Did that person have a hyphen? You couldn't have done that if that happened. She was really, really very, very meticulous in checking everything. So I'm eternally grateful to her. I hope I never meet her. She was really great, and I think that, you know, the more you write, and once you start getting into meaty books, they give you an editor who's often going to take the book from being a good kind of book and really fine-tune it. Yeah.
As somebody that's worked in journalism for so long, what are your thoughts on the standards of South African writing, in particular Black South African writing?
I think the standards are pretty good. I don't think the newspapers are always reflecting the standards. I think that if you start looking online, there's some hell of a good writing going on. I don't know if any of you read Daily Maverick. That carries excellent voices of top South African writers. I think to some extent some of the newspapers have dumbed down, but I don't think that's because of their writers. I think it's because they're slaves to the buck. They're driven by advertising. The actual quality itself of the paper has fallen in many cases. And I think that a lot of the newspapers are battling to get finance, and so because of the online developments. So I think it depends where you look. Some newspapers are appalling. I think some are quite good. I often think that journalists don't get the right training at the papers. I think they're often thrown into the deep end. And if you're writing in a second language, you know, that's not your fault. You should get a better training, or there should be better editors, or there should be harder work. But I don't think the standard of journalism is suffering.
No, I ask that because I find the power and the authority of the print is still quite weighted. And I think unless you grow up in that environment, it's very difficult to reach that standard in one or maybe even 2 generations. But that's not your first language, you know. So I'm always wondering about how to catch up. Is it just a whole stack of hard work and just keep writing?
And reading. I also think that the trouble with online sometimes is that it's a different kind of writing. It's designed for short attention spans. People want bite-sized news, you know. They don't want to trawl through a long political article, they want to pick up their phone and go, bing, 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 those are the headlines, bang, 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 that's what happened. So I think that we, as consumers of news, we want it faster and quicker, we want it harder, now, more, you know, we're almost saturated. So it's a different kind of scene. Newspapers, you've got more time to read, you've got more, you know, they're a slower read. But I think because of that bite size, that short attention span mentality, maybe the journalism suffers there. Yeah. What does anyone else think about that?
I was wondering how one could promote long-form journalism. Because that's where it's harder and harder to find things to read that actually are meaty and really analyze. So, you like the slow food movement.
Yeah. I think some of the international media have got behind-the-scenes stuff. The Guardian UK, that still carries excellent long form. Daily Maverick also carries long form stuff. You've got to dig around. There's a brilliant travel website, if any of you feel like trawling a bit. It's called Rhodes and Kingdoms.com. Absolutely brilliant journalism from around the world. It's not simply travel, it's kind of travel with intelligence. That really is worth a look at because it carries stuff from all around the globe. Even CNN's website has an amazing, they've got a section called African Voices, which has incredibly good stories from around the continent. So I think you can find it, you just got to dig, you know, trawl. More gigs.
What is it, Rhodes?
Rhodes and Kingdoms. All one word. Rhodesandkingdoms.com. And that for me, it's got no advertising, so it's privately funded, so it doesn't detract from, you know, the eye. And it has really, really good stories. That would be one of my top websites, I'd say. Non-news.
On page 66 you write, as journalism students we are more exposed to the harsh realities of the country's political situation, and I feel a heaviness at the duties that lie ahead. And I'm very interested in your identity at that time between journalism student and political activist, and how they fed each other, how they spoke to each other, and were they very much linked for you? Or,
Good
just
question.
that duty.
I think to paint a context, information at that time was very strictly controlled. We didn't have a free press. So, you know, I'm all for any kind of journalism as long as we're free, it's great, right? Shit headlines, I don't mind. So don't censor us. But we were censored. There were media regulations forbidding, for example, coverage of what they called unrest. There were information blackouts. So for the broader public, a lot of that news wasn't getting out. But because we were journalism students and we, by virtue of our lecturers who had colleagues in the field, we were exposed to information that maybe somebody from the sciences department would never have come across. So there was a correlation just because of the nature of journalism. And journalists are all chatty, networky, you know, this one passes that one thing on, and there was always a kind of meshing between the two. We'd hear stuff from the outside world, from a reporter, say, on the Herald, who'd covered something in the townships. They might not necessarily have been able to write about it in the paper, but the news came filtering through. So I think because of that, we really did have a better sense of what was going on in the country at the time. And because we had that better sense, we felt compelled to act on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to know that you manage being a student and an activist. Because I understand most times when you try to do both, one suffers at some point. And when you came out from detention, did you think of living the struggle indirectly, or you just felt more energized?
Okay, let me deal with the student and activist thing. I think often, and sadly, the education came second. You know, if you had a choice between a meeting and a lecture, often we'd go to the meeting. But I think that we were quite dedicated. Early lectures were always a problem. But because it was a journalism degree, and because it didn't feel schizophrenic, it felt like the two kind of belonged together, what I was saying just now. Because we knew what was going on, it was almost important to keep on being an activist and a journalist. And I think then we could do it. I think students today might find it a lot more difficult, because it seems more separate. But we worked hard. I don't know where we all got the energy from. Probably from drinking BioPlus, all those like speed things that keep you going all night. But we did our activism and a lot of our media work in the Students' Union. That Students' Union used to buzz all night long. We had a darkroom there, we had all the facilities there, so I don't know how we did it, but we did. And we never, Simon, you might have some input there. I mean, you worked endlessly on rodeo. We used to work through the night.
Yeah, I very seldom went to lectures. I was a terrible student. It took me 5 years to get my degree.